All right, now to the story the whole world is watching tonight. Any minute now, we could see the release of the final batch of records related to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. It's a hot topic on all across social media. Now, we have your comments. They're going to be scrolling at the bottom of the screen, but the big question tonight is, when would all of this happen? The president tweeted that the release would happen today, and with most of government agencies closed for business at this point, there's no sign of when it might happen. This is Jason Whiteley live in the newsroom with our JFK expert, Ferris Rookstool. So, guys, we're supposed to get an update from the White House, I guess, any minute now, what I'm hearing.
In fact, John, as we were doing this here, David Schechter just got off a telephone call with the White House. About 20 minutes ago, we heard that the White House is going to have a background briefing call on this entire situation. So we're getting the camera adjusted here. David just walked up, just got a microphone on here. Here we are at 5:03 Dallas time, 6:03 on the East Coast. The government has up until midnight tonight to comply with the federal law passed in 1992 to release the remaining 3,000 or so documents from the JFK records. The government hasn't done that so far. There are a few agencies that are having some protests, some concern about what might be in these documents. David, you just heard from the White House. What did they say?
Yeah, is my microphone good? Okay, so they're going to release 2,800 records like right now. And the president has ordered that any organization, looks like primarily the FBI and the CIA, who may have some issues, to go through a 6-month review process to make their case as to why those documents would need to be withheld. So this is essentially the first release of documents. There will be a rolling releases over time. The one thing that I did take away that I found to be interesting was that we make it think like all these documents are from mid-60s, but they're documents from the 70s and they're documents from the 90s, which would be more sensitive, for example, if you're working with a foreign government on an investigation. So they aren't all as old as we think.
That's a good point. These documents span from when Lee Harvey Oswald first popped up on the radar for the CIA to 1992 when that law took effect. That's how far it goes. As we look at some of the video here of some of these records, 5 million records. This includes the Warren Commission, the State Department, the CIA.
The 5 investigating entities.
Congressional committees and stuff like that. So 2,800 records coming out imminently here is what David's hearing from the White House. Will these records tie off any loose ends, or are these just footnotes, do you think, Ferris?
I think it's going to still be more confusing because we're only going to get fragments. Are they still going to dump the other 5 million tonight? Are they saying they're going to do that?
They're doing 2,800 today, and then there'll be a rolling release over time.
Exactly.
And so we kind of got shifted around since this is kind of breaking news that happened just here, but Ferris Rookstool is a former FBI analyst. You've seen him on Channel 8 for years. He's our resident JFK historian as well here too. So we rely on him for perspective and context on this information. And David just got off the phone with the White House. So that's pretty impressive that the president says, okay, you got 6 months to look at this. Question I had is, these have been sitting in the hopper for 25 years.
Well,
what in the world?
We now have
why procrastinate?
We have a bait and switch. We now went from we're back to the original part. The archive said they were going to release them over time, and then they changed their mind and said they were going to dump them all at one time, which is 5 million at once. Now we're back to the original plan of we're going to release them over time. So if they're only releasing 2,800 records now from the 3,100, and they're going to release the others over time, we're kind of still with people waiting, thinking, oh, this other stuff must be still out there.
One question I had too is the National Archives and Records Administration says much of what's going to be released will be tangential to the actual assassination events. What do you expect we'll find in there, Ferris?
Well, not knowing which specific records of the 2,800, I honestly couldn't tell you.
Do you expect a smoking gun, a big revelation at all? Not at all?
No. But I think that the other records that have been, quote, released, the difference is, were they released in a digital format that are going to make it easily accessible, or they released in the sense that you have to make an appointment at the archives to go and see them?
So these will be all digital. These will not be available at the archives at all. It's all going to be released digitally. There's going to be a spreadsheet that's going to come out with metadata, meaning like tags, here's what's in the information, and then searchable, and there'll be PDFs inside those spreadsheets.
And one thing we've discussed, by not releasing this, and by taking so long to release this, and withholding some of it, this just fuels the conspiracy theories that have lasted for decades.
I mean, I'm probably less of a conspiracy theorist than most. I do think that the I do think that the reasons of national intelligence, law enforcement, military, and foreign relations is what they're saying.
Yep.
Is probably worth a second look, and
Yep.
you could wait another 6 months if you waited
I
this
agree.
many years. So there was a really strong emphasis in this phone call that you are going to have a super compelling reason to keep these private, and so they've set up a process over 6 months to go through that process.
Which agencies are the ones that are making the protest to this? Did they say which agencies?
FBI and CIA.
So it's the FBI and CIA. It's not the State Department. It's not obviously the Warren Commission, long since disbanded. But that would make sense. The CIA perhaps still using some of these protocols, some of these.
And we were doing
policies in
active
place.
investigations even in the 1990s. I mean, I was, like I mentioned earlier, I was a part of doing things that we went all the way up until, when I took the files to D.C., that we ended up shipping some of these files later to FBI headquarters.
One thing that's important to point out, so there are the remaining documents, 3,100, part of the assassination files. This is supposed to be the last document dump, but there are still a handful, dozens, or perhaps hundreds of tax records related to the Oswalds and the Rubies that will not be released.
And those are exempt.
And exempt, I asked you this earlier, but for clarification, exempt because this has
Personal privacy issues.
Marina's social security number, who
Correct.
still lives in Rockwall, or what?
Yeah, that's correct.
Can't they redact? I mean, there is a lot of discussion about redaction. I mean,
Yes.
Those are things you could take a black pen and go over. Obviously.
Absolutely.
Someone who's passed away.
And like I brought up earlier with Jack Ruby's tax returns, one of the things that they had about that is the Jack Ruby's tax returns were in fact discussed in the civil trial down here during the probate matter.
And just
Should we
to
refresh and see if these documents have come up? Perhaps they're coming
let's
up
check
right now.
that as we're checking this. Just to make sure you know who everybody is here. I'm Jason Whiteley, a political reporter. David Schechter is another senior reporter here, and Ferris Rookstool is
Still says stay tuned.
Ferris Rookstool is a former FBI analyst here in the Dallas field office. He's also our resident JFK historian, someone you've seen on Channel 8 for years. One place we're going to, actually the main place we're going to, is archives.gov. Archives.gov.
Still the July release.
On the main page of that, there is a black banner that says stay tuned for JFK assassination records collection. Stay tuned for updates on that. So we keep refreshing that every few minutes to see if there's any update, to see if these remaining 3,100 documents might be out yet, might be uploaded. And since doing this at 6:30 or 7:30 a.m. since you first came on Daybreak this morning, we're just wearing out that refresh button, huh?
Yeah, we need some more batteries for the mouse.
There were two. So I got off this briefing from the White House, and the archives were on the line as well. A couple of interesting questions which nobody answered. Is there any conspiracy information in here? And the answer was, you'll have to just go see for yourself. And someone also asked if the father of Ted Cruz is mentioned in any of these documents as being involved, as the president had alleged in the assassination.
And we heard some of that in the 2016 presidential election as well, too. Our conversation is continuing right now on Facebook Live, so if you want to hear more from David, from Ferris, you can join us on your tablet, your laptop, or your phone over there as well, too. But John and Cynthia will send it back to you, rather.
All right, appreciate that information. We'll, of course, continue our coverage of JFK documents here on News 8. Once they are all released, we'll have details on what's inside on air and, of course, on WFAA.com.
A lot more ahead here. News 8.